Well, that's the thing. I mean, when it comes to regards to honesty and research and, sexual stuff, I will go with one of my favorite researchers, Sir Mix-a-Lot, because
Yeah, okay.
he likes big butts and cannot lie, and you
Mm-hmm.
other brothers cannot deny. So, I mean, we're starting from there. Episode 69. Kink is autistic.
Welcome to the Autistic Culture Podcast. Each episode, we dive deep into autistic contributions to society and culture by introducing you to some of the world's most famous and successful autistics in history.
Before we get started, a quick disclaimer on how we use the word autistic. The purpose of this show is not to diagnose the people or characters we discuss as autistic. While some may have announced being autistic, what we're really sharing here is our observation of what is representative of autistic culture. It can sometimes be difficult for autistic people to celebrate our natural tendencies and traits due to the perception of autism as a disorder that needs to be fixed, a long history of damaging medical interventions to get autistics to fit in with mainstream culture, and protective masking skills many of us have developed to try to stay safe.
Whether you are autistic or just love someone who is, your hosts, Dr. Angela Lauria, the linguistic autistic,
and licensed psychological practitioner Matt Lowry, welcome you to take this time to be fully immersed in the language, values, traditions, norms, and identity of Autistica.
Hey, Angela.
Hey, Matt, what's going on?
Oh man. I think I told you a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I have no concept of time. But I was talking to some really, really nice people about like the autistic experience, and I was telling them about how, my son's autistic and my family's autistic, and someone asked if he was my biological son.
I remember that.
And I said, why, yes. And somebody was like, well, how did you make him? And I'm like, I wanted to go into the raw and dirty way, but,
I'm sure you wanted to answer the actual question that was asked.
I wanted to be as precise as possible.
That's
with
not
graphic
what they
detail,
meant.
A PowerPoint presentation, all of that. But, I was very short and to the point about it, but it occurred to me while answering this question that there is a big a myth out there that we do not have the sex.
Seriously, I think we can blame Love on the Spectrum and their little kiddie music, their little nature toys adventure where it's like, they're children for life. It's so nice as a parent. You'll have a baby for life in your home.
Exactly. That level of infantilization is something that I believe that we really, as the Autistic Culture Podcast, we need to counter. And while I could regale you with my exploits, I think that we will turn to a professional. So I called in a friend of mine. I called in a friend of mine, Dr. Kade Sharp, who is an expert in these areas. So I will introduce you to Dr. Kade, and he is going to tell you a lot about his studies and his fascinating findings about the sex life of autistics. We're going to go all Kinsey on this.
Woohoo! All right. Well, this is, a great follow-up to the Kinsey study, and I am super excited to meet Dr. Sharp. You know so many doctors, Matt.
I do. Yeah, I'm kind of like Batman, only, they're not trying to kill me. It's great. So, Dr. Sharp, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Fairly freshly minted doctor as of January, so one of the newer doctors in Matt's life, although we've been friends before I went into the program. So,
congratulations. That's exciting. Give us or give me at least a little of your background, and where did you get this fine degree that you have thus procured from academia?
Yeah, so I am a social worker. I have my master's in social work, and straight out of grad school, I went into community mental health, and I worked exclusively with folks under the age of 21. And I became a registered play therapist. and a child mental health specialist. So very different than this PhD program that I pursued.
From play to play. Was that the name
exactly.
of your...
If I write a memoir.
Yeah, okay. It would have a wink in it, though.
Yes, absolutely. So
where'd you graduate from? Where'd you get your degree from?
Yeah, just wrapped up through Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, which is down in Florida, but they offer a virtual option. So pretty cool.
I didn't know we had modern sex therapy institutes, and particularly not in Florida. I think they have unmodern sex therapy institutes. The whole different thing happening. But okay, let's hear it for the people holding strong in Florida. Keeping it together for the rest of us.
Yeah, so just did that program. Part of why I decided to go that route instead of sticking to the play therapist stuff and the child mental health stuff was because when I opened my private practice in 2020, I thought, okay, I'll be exclusively working with youth, marketed mostly towards youth, teens and kids. And what happened was a bunch of local queer, trans, quirky, highly sensitive people, empaths, folks with lots of descriptors started flocking to me to figure out what's going on here. Why am I the way that I am? How can you support me? And it turns out that they're all autistic.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so as I worked more and more with teens, young adults, and adults, I thought, let's look at what they actually need support around. And one of the things they really needed support around was later in life diagnosis. And we don't have that here where I practice in southeastern Washington. It is hard enough to get youth accurately diagnosed, much less adults.
Southeast, is that like near Idaho? Did I do that right in my head? And isn't Idaho like a bastion of like death for our people?
Yes. Lots of, maybe we should put a trigger warning on the content for this episode. But Idaho is known for groups of neo-Nazis and evangelical cult type things. Very conservative. Yeah, very conservative politics. They're trying to pass some bans on trans healthcare for youth especially. So not super safe there. And then where I'm at is a more rural area, although we keep increasing in population and folks are getting more progressive. So hopefully we're headed in the right direction. So.
Okay, so how do we get from late in life diagnosis to, I hear we're talking about kink today, so that seems like a journey. Yes. Tell me, Well, first of all, let's just start, because we're using this word kink, but sometimes people like kinky can mean lots of things. People don't even know what it means. So give us, what are we actually talking about?
So today I took some notes, so you might, if you're watching the video version, you'll see me glance. I wanted to make sure I got this quote right because I love the episodes where Matt puts on his professional voice and reads a quote that is just horrible.
You can have Matt read it. I have Matt read my quotes just because I like hearing his voice, his professional voice.
Well, let's see. Matt, do you have access to the chat? I'll totally have you read this one.
I do. And I will put on my professional voice to read the most terrible quotes ever. So lay it on me.
He knows what his job is here. I have trained him efficiently.
So I'll send it in the chat. And this is kind of like in the mental health world, the history of kink. This is what it's actually known as in the mental health world.
Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. Oh God. Okay. Paraphilias are defined as any intense and persistent sexual interest other than sexual interest in genital stimulation or preparatory fondling with phenotypically normal, physiologically mature, consenting human partners. American Psychiatric Association, APA 2013, page 685.
Wait, I want to flip off that quote, though.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that definition.
So they're strictly missionary then. Great.
What?
Yes. With the purpose of procreation. Yeah.
Wait, I think just found out I'm kinky.
I think a lot of your listeners are going to find out today.
Well, if that's the definition of not kinky.
Yeah, because that's straight up some vanilla. So, wait.
Yeah.
So, congratulations, listeners. You're about to learn a thing about yourself.
Hold on. Can we stop on preparatory fondling? I thought I was having fun, but I was just having preparatory fondling.
Yeah. And there's also a whole nother level of yikes when we think of our like non-hetero, non-penis and vagina type sexual interactions.
Yeah.
Well, how do they, what are they preparing for?
Yeah. Like 70 years of preparatory action just in case, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So that,
2013,
that's still how they were defining it. But essentially, when we're diagnosing things like paraphilia in the DSM, we're looking for how does it affect your quality of life. So if
just
it's
like the autism.
Distressing, exactly. It's like if it's distressing enough, but then, just like if you're autistic, if you're trans, if you're queer, because all those things have been in the DSM, are you distressed because of you or because of people's response to you or not having a community, So kink really goes hand in hand with subverting norms. And that was a big piece of the research that I did, and a big piece of the research that was starting to come out around the time that I joined my PhD program and was getting started on all this. So kinks are defined that way in the DSM, well, per APA. And then if we look at it through a more social narrative, a social lens, kinky activities would refer to any activity that somebody engages in that doesn't conform to social, religious, or psychiatric norms. So in the U.S., Christian nation, think of anything that the Bible might say you should not do. If you're doing it, you're kinky.
I don't think that it's ever approved of like anything I've done, like personal or professional. So.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All right.
Wow. I need to nap.
That's unfortunate.
We're 9 minutes into this episode and I'm tired. Come on. Give us the good stuff. Give me something juicy.
We will definitely get to the good stuff because I wanted to focus on the empowerment aspects and we'll talk about why. But the other thing that's really important for your listeners to know and for all of us to know is that kinky activities, kink, is not just sexual. So in fact, a good proportion of the folks that responded to my eligibility survey for the study were on the ARO-ACE spectrum, so aromantic, asexual, demisexual.
Also
kink
kinky?
Is not necessarily, kink is not necessarily sexual. I know a lot of people think it is, so I like to put that up front too, that you can be kinky without the goal or point being like sexual gratification, climax, arousal. It doesn't have to be those things. So that also tends to blow people's minds because when you think of kink, you usually think of like whatever is in pop culture, like 50 Shades of Grey, something like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Badly written.
Not accurate.
Okay, this may or may not qualify. Now I feel like it's like we're now in pub trivia, but like I had an intense and persistent interest in Harajuku girls. I had like 5 years. All I wanted to do was like look at and dress like a Harajuku girl and go to Japan. But I didn't really want, even though I'm bi, I didn't like want to have sex with a Harajuku girl. I didn't even like particularly want to like have sex dressed as a Harajuku girl. But there was something that was like connecting me with my sense of like creativity and sexuality. And I felt really like pretty and sexy and excited, but it wasn't like, hey, I want to do something because I have ponytails in. It was just like, it made me feel like a sexual being. Is that kink?
Sure. I mean, if you think of like, does that adhere to our religious and social and cultural norms? Probably not.
I didn't know how to answer the question. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, does it? Is it normal? I don't know.
I mean, you're definitely not the first person I've heard of to say something like that, but that level of like empowerment and embodiment that you felt and that many of us feel around certain special interests could border on that kink boundary depending. Yeah. I think kink is also kind of like sexuality. There are so many labels and variations where it's like, it's the same with gender. If you want to call it kinky, it's kinky. If you want to say it's not, it's not. There are a lot of kinksters who like to occasionally engage in, what do they call it? Preparatory fondling in a rebellious way of like, tonight we're not going to be kinky. And is that kinky then because of the intent underneath?
Is that like with the vegetables and taking it to the edge?
There you go. They get a little kinkception.
We love sharing stories of autistic culture, and if you are seeing yourself in any of these stories and you're wondering if maybe you're one of us, or maybe you're already diagnosed or self-diagnosed, and you want to know if Matt can help you live your life better and be more authentically autistic, check out his website at mattlowrylpp.com. That's Matt, M-A-T-T, Lowry, L-O-W-R-Y. And then that LPP, it stands for Licensed Psychological Practitioner. So head on over to mattlowrylpp.com and learn more about working with my buddy Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, but I think I maybe lost the thread here. How did you go from late diagnosed autistics to where does sex or sexuality or particularly kink come up? I definitely see the connection between the not norms part, but how
it was
and
kind
why
of
sex?
A little bit of a twofold thing. One, in the state of Washington, certain types of PhDs are allowed to diagnose autism in ways that will help you get disability funds or other access to services like IEPs, 504 school type things. And I thought, could this perhaps be a loophole? Because there's no way that I could tolerate 8 years to get a psych PhD in the programs that are usually very pathologizing. And knowing that I'm autistic, that just sounded like hell.
Yes.
So I thought maybe I get the PhD here, and the double value of this is that, one, I guess it's a special interest of mine for a long time, and then also it will help my clients because many of them subvert a lot of norms in their relationships, whether kink or otherwise, and it would just be so useful to know, how am I supporting folks in regards to intimacy, in regards to pleasure, in regards to their own accommodations that they need for whatever reasons that may come off as kinky to some. So I thought, let's just go in, see what I can do. Sadly, it does not qualify me for any loophole. I still cannot officially formally diagnose. However, it has been super useful for my clients, for myself, for my friends, so this has been still, I'd say, a net positive, and the research that I'm helping push out into the world here so more people can be aware of hey, this could be a venue for autistic empowerment, something to consider if you haven't already, or something to reaffirm, if you're doing these things, you're not alone. You're not odd for doing it. That this is not a shameful thing, a stigma-based thing. This is kind of the norm for a lot of folks.
That's awesome.
Interesting.
And again, it gives you an opportunity to research, like we were saying earlier about how we have been traditionally infantilized, and therefore the knowledge base is intentionally limited as to autistic sexuality. So you become, well, I was going to say the autistic Kinsey, but boy, he was autistic. We've already covered that in a prior episode. But you get to have a brave new world of study in an area that is traditionally ignored. So tell us about all the stuff that you have learned so far. Tell us about this dissertation. Tell us about adding to the knowledge base, because that's, I feel like autistic people, the knowledge base is the most essential thing ever. So tell us about this, and tell us how you are empowering and improving the lives of autistics.
Yeah, that's, huge goal of mine was to make a difference for autistic folks, with a secondary goal being for the professionals that are in our lives to also have some paradigm shifts, because you're right. So many people think that we are either innocent, unable to consent, never going to do anything sexual or kinky. Or on the flip side, they view us as hypersexual deviants who don't understand boundaries or social cues or norms. So in doing the dissertation, you first do a lit review and you look at what was out there and what's currently out there.
Yeah.
And it was bad. It was real bad, as you might imagine.
Well, if the APA is where we're starting off, holy God, how deep was that hole you had to dig yourself out of? That was huge.
Bad as in it's very pathologizing, or bad as in there's just not research on autistic people and our sex lives?
A little bit of both. There is some research. I think the earliest study that I cite was from the early 90s, and it was kind of a look into sex education for intellectually disabled and autistic folks that was all kind of lumped together. And
Fantastic.
they were running some like trials and research stuff based in a group home where it was kind of a mixed company of who was in there.
Oh,
and they ended up leaving me with this one line that I wish I could quote perfectly, but something along the lines of, for goodness sakes, we need to get some good sexual education for these folks, at least around masturbation, because that is likely the extent that they will ever, achieve is to masturbate.
Oh, wow. Yep. Okay.
So that's where we started in the 90s.
Audible sigh.
I don't understand how people reach these conclusions.
I know. Well, I can tell you, because what I found is I kept looking through the years at these studies, from the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, as I'm going through it, it's like, okay, so you are quantitatively surveying us, autistic folks. You are qualitatively surveying our parents, our teachers, anyone but us.
Anyone want to ask us? Anyone interested in what we have to say? No takers. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are some studies that show that we are more likely to have paraphilic fantasies than the like control group of aulistics, so non-autistic folks. But they never. I mean, there's no digging deeper as to, is this true, or did the aulistics think, maybe I shouldn't admit to some of these, because the autistic folks were very honest, I feel, in representing what they're into and what they're not. Whereas maybe for the sake of research, maybe, who knows,
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when it comes to regards to honesty and research and, sexual stuff, I go with one of my favorite researchers, Sir Mix-a-Lot. Because he likes big butts and cannot lie. Mm-hmm. And you other brothers cannot deny. So, I mean, we're starting from there. I agree with him. I mean, we're there. But what did they find by interviewing the ancillary people in these people's lives versus, what the people themselves are like, yeah, I like big butts. And then go from there. What all did they discover with this? Because that's horrifying.
And did they encourage the autism moms to read their children's diaries and set up nanny cams?
What they found through numbers is that, yes, we're more likely to have certain types of fantasies. So sadism, masochism, turning defeat into victory, which they interestingly... Yeah, which I'm
going to start having that fantasy right now.
All righty.
Hold on. I'm going to get my partner. I got plans. I want to dance. I'm ready for it.
Sadly, some of the ones that they found are kind of the more taboo ones. So then there was, of course, this whole line of like, are autistic people predators? Because they were more likely to endorse... it was frauderism, which is where you're like rubbing against a person without their consent. Now, these are fantasies.
Right.
So
for definition, define fantasy here for the sake of listeners and any researchers who don't understand things.
Yeah, I mean, at the simplest definition, it's a thought. It's something you're envisioning, whether that's through images or words. It might be something you're drawing or writing about, but you're not taking action to do that to someone. I mean, then it becomes an activity or a behavior.
So, and this is a thing that I run into a lot as a therapist. There are a lot of autistic people who have these fantasies and like to write stories about them, like to draw art about them, like to do all this stuff, but are terrified of the repercussions of ever acting on any fantasy, no matter how tame, even as I would like to touch a butt sometime. They are terrified of being exposed as a horrible, horrible person due to all this internalized rejection, sensitivity, and all this kind of stuff. Tell us what you found and what they found and all of this stuff.
Yeah. So, in these studies, the participants are anonymous. So I feel they were probably pretty open, pretty honest. The aulistic folks who reported lower levels, who knows why? Nobody followed up to ask, like, did you lie to us?
How did they bias the research? Because, like, I feel like if you ask me what's my fantasy, I'm going to answer you what's my fantasy. But if you ask an aulistic, what's your fantasy? They might interpret that question as, what would the researcher want me to say was my fantasy?
Yeah.
So there's I always feel like even if it's anonymous, I don't know that the way like hierarchical thinking works and holistic survival, which, you know, they're going to survive longer than us anyway, statistically. So it's like, I think part of that survival is what I experience as lying. I think they experience it as something else. I always forget what it is. I'm not sure, but being nice.
They may go through a list of socially acceptable fantasies, like I would like to have intercourse in a missionary position. Thank you very much.
Yeah, or even like it would seem like a good fantasy to be raped because people know like there's a rape fantasy. So I'll admit that one, but I'm not going to admit rubbing up against a stranger because I've never heard of that. There's not like a whole bunch of Penthouse forum letters about that.
And that raises a question. Are people who have fantasies bad people?
No.
Are they not?
No,
explain.
No, you're allowed to have thoughts. Thoughts are thoughts, you know, and a lot of the times we can't control what thoughts pop into our mind. That I get asked that by a lot of clients. Absolutely.
I have
people worry.
This isn't about kink, but it sort of is in a tangential way. I was in Buenos Aires on a trip, and all of the cars were like covered in this dust. It wasn't pollen, but it was like this silt or like this dirt. And literally all I could think about, all I can remember about the whole trip was how much I wanted to lick the cars.
Yeah, like an intrusive little,
I was like, why am I thinking that? I don't want to lick the cars. But I mean, it was like robust hours of fantasy about licking these cars. And like, and it did kind of feel sexual. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was like, it would be like so fucking orgasmic to just get to lick this car. And then I was like, see, I don't want to think about that.
So that raises a question, because we know for a fact that autistic people have heightened senses, that autistic people are can be very sensory seeking in certain regards, and that we are known to stim. Does this follow to the same category as like stimming and sensory seeking?
Oh, yes.
Oh, does it?
Yes, as we dive into my results, you know, hearing from the autistic, they're participants, but in the style that I use, they're called co-researchers. Hearing them talk about the sensory aspects, and almost, you know, unprompted, you know, like hey, here's some autistic traits from the strength-based criteria. How does kink align for you in those ways? Everyone had examples, you know? Yes, but in those
This is the way.
Yeah, but in the past research, nobody's digging that deep. Nobody's thinking maybe people are fantasizing or wanting to engage in spanking, whipping, biting, choking because they need more sensory input. They're thinking it's because you're perverse and mentally ill, which not the case, you know?
Wow.
I mean,
okay, tell us more about your research. Who'd you hear from? How many people? What are some of your findings? I'm super curious.
Yeah, so kind of going from all the old lit review stuff, I thought, okay, I'm gonna at least I'm gonna do a qualitative study, because I don't want just numbers for this. I want to like get to know what people are thinking, have a chance to follow up with them. And so I ended up trying for 10, and I got 6 folks who I was able to schedule interviews with and the follow-up interviews. But I had about 40 unique responses to the eligibility survey, so I had like a good amount of interest. I only posted the ad in 3 different places. One was on a certain subreddit. I think it's called Sex on the Spectrum. And then 2 FetLife groups, which is like a kinky social networking site. I forget which 2, but they were also based in neurodivergence and autism. So I kind of targeted and honed in a little bit. I wanted people who are frequently engaging in kink at least once per week over the last 6 months. So we needed people who really know this stuff and do find it empowering. So I had 6 folks who joined us, and from the eligibility survey alone, you know, there was a majority of white people who were also disabled, queer, whether that is for gender or sexuality, and submissives or bottoms, depending on how they wanted to identify. So that was cool. And when I looked for who to interview, I tried to pick based on, you know, do like a proportionate ratio of, okay, there were this many tops, so I need at least this many to represent them. And so we ended up with a pretty good group. The initial interview was about 2 hours, and then the follow-up was 1 hour. And through that, I learned a lot of great stuff. Let me, maybe we pause here so I can pull some stuff up really quickly.
Cool.
Perfect. So we kind of talked about lit review stuff. I will say I also really looked at research on disabled folks, because that there was not much on autism and kink. There was a bit on autism and social relationships. What I found in that was that we are more likely to be interest-driven in sex, and we are more likely to meet folks in interest-driven spaces. So online dating is usually
what do other people do? That's the only thing. What's not interest dating? Oh, like it's just so, like what you look like?
It's so funny because the way they describe what we're not doing is that the autistic people are seeking attachment and intimacy. Well, what do they think we're doing when we're engaging in our interests with our loved ones?
Right.
I'm so
but it's
confused.
Holistic research.
I'm so confused.
Yes. So
they're looking for attachment.
I want to research holistic researchers because they baffle me.
I'm so fascinated. Wow. So they're looking for attachment, but we're just looking to like talk about trains or whatever we're into.
Yeah, we're just looking to bring a lightsaber into the bedroom. That's because we like Star Wars, not because, hey, this is this cool, impactful thing that I'd like to show you and like hang out with you and do things with. But I feel like
in movies and stuff, it's like, oh, we both like these books or we both like this band, aren't they? What do you, okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to get over it. I'm going to get over it.
So some of that old literature, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I can, either like, that is what I found too, or not what I found. And so I looked at disabled folks as well. And just to kind of wrap up on the lit review, one of the themes that emerged was that for all groups, they are enjoying intimacy, relationships, kink, themselves, feeling the most empowered when they are subverting societal norms. That's the
everybody? Or just autistic people?
So autistic people, disabled people, and queer people.
That's what we want to do.
How does kink relate to PDA then?
Oh, you'll hear from my co-researcher, Allie, who is a self-described brat. I think PDA and her bratting works really neatly together to give her the empowerment she needs, and that autonomy and that safety and that regulation that she needs. So let me skip ahead here. Skipping some slides that just talk about the dissertation. I'll be sure that you have that for your show notes in case people want to go read it.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes.
So briefly, I'll introduce you to my
co-researchers.
You'll notice there's a D&D theme. You can ignore that for now if you read the dissertation.
No, we cannot ignore that. Allie the Sorceress. Oh my God. It makes it way better. Yes. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in the research modality that I'm using, it's called heuristic inquiry. There is a creative synthesis piece. And after meeting with all these folks and mulling over their responses and trying to, thematically organize everything, it became quite clear that they are all super powerful, super awesome folks with their own lore and background and lives, and the way that it intertangled with each other is so interesting. So I thought, a lot of what they shared, and for some reason, the way I lined up the questions and the way they gave their answers, everybody was explaining their own hero's journey, if you're familiar with that trope.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's a piece. Yeah, so I got an ADHD artist, Elle Hockman, to draw me some art. So I described it in words, and they took it upon themselves to draw each researcher without ever seeing them, each co-researcher. And so this is Allie. I deemed her the sorceress. She was between the ages of 18 and 26, a white cis female, ace flux, bi-curious when feeling allosexual, panromantic. She was diagnosed as autistic when she was young. She does identify as disabled, and she is a sub and a brat. And she's been engaging in kink over the last 6 months, about 1 to 3 times per week.
I just don't want to lose people. I have no idea what a sub or a brat is.
So sub stands for submissive. It is usually the not necessarily partner on the bottom, but it is somebody who is not usually taking the lead. Now, with her being a brat as well, she might be a little sassy. She might try to take the lead, but the end goal is consensually that she does not want to actually take the lead. Her role is more in the submissive side of things.
Can you talk about the negotiation process between a dom and a dominant person and a submissive person? Because again, terrible movies like 50 Shades of Grey say, oh yes, I'm a terrible abusive person and you'll do everything I say. And that's not healthy. So what is a healthy relationship look like, and how does the clear definition of rules apply to autistic people?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the results that I found as well, is that structure is such a useful thing, especially for us autistic folks. There is supposed to be a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth. Some of the folks that I spoke with have spreadsheets for their partner or multiple partners saying like, yes to anal, no to spanking, maybe to flogging, like they break it down. And some of the folks even will say like, yes, if these other circumstances happen as well. They really go deep on talking about that stuff so that they can be ready and prepared when they're in the bedroom or when they're
so great.
Or at a dungeon or in public, because some of the folks I interviewed do have like a 24/7 lifestyle where they're always falling into these roles because it's not just sexual. Allie was someone who said, like, when we go to the gaming store, like, we're still in our roles, and it still is empowering because, like, we know each other so well. We know where we stand. We know our dynamics. A different co-researcher explained it as, like, a guidebook to the relationship and how to make their partner happy. And it's not...
Oh, my God. That sounds so great.
Which
you don't have to...
Yes, because that's the thing about like allistic relationships. There's so much unspoken stuff and so much resentment because allistic partners say, he should know what I want, or, that kind of nonsense. But when you explicitly negotiate and have spreadsheets regarding everything from eye contact to butt stuff, it makes relationships run a lot smoother. And it seems like this level of communication would be ideal for any partnership, romantic, sexual, or otherwise.
Absolutely. Also, because even with my clients who aren't kinky, like we talk about, like, how can we make these things more explicit communication wise, or, affection wise? Like, what do you need that you're not getting, or what are you getting that is uncomfortable for you? So I think there's a lot that even folks who are like, I have zero interest in kink could learn from the things that kinky folks do.
If only they had a recurring source of information from someone who's an expert on kink.
Yeah,
but we may have to talk about that.
I'm sure there's some holistics who would be happy to help.
Yes, there are.
Just
fondle here.
I just like also the rules are still in place at the gaming store, so we have Dungeons, Asterisk, and Dragons, because we different locales. So
So that's one way folks can kind of structure things, is having those conversations, whether it is using mouth words or a spreadsheet or typing to each other through text, through chat, whatever it is, really getting explicit with the conversations. And then it's there's a couple different like acronyms in the community, so it depends on which community you're part of. But one of the more recent one, it used to be safe, sane, and consensual, but that's a little ableist because we can't guarantee that we're all sane.
Yeah.
And kink is not all safe. Like if you are going to choke someone, there is always a risk, even if you're being cautious that something could go wrong. Same with bondage. Like there's always a little risk. So more commonly now, people say things like RACK, R-A-C-K, risk aware consensual kink.
Oh, I like that. So, okay.
So part of it then becomes acknowledge, if you're going to do something specific, especially something you've never tried before, acknowledging the different risks, having some plans around what you might do if somebody's getting handcuffed, if you lose the keys, what's the next, if you have EDS and you're handcuffed, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and you start to pop out of joint, what's the either safe word if you've got a gag, and how are you conveying like, we need this to stop, I'm aching, I need help. So usually people have safe words that stop things, or kind of a red, yellow, green system where green is like, yep, I'm good. So in any point in the middle of anything, even at the gaming store, Allie had shared, like, if I get a little overwhelmed and my partner notices, he'll be like, color or something like that. And that's her cue to say like yellow, like I might need to get out of here, or red, get me the heck out of this space now. It doesn't even have to be in a necessarily kink setting.
Love that.
And that's interesting because that in itself helps resolve an issue that we face with expectation sensitivity. Because again, we process so much data and the world is so chaotic and we don't know what to do in these situations that we're unprepared for and unexpected. So this heightens and presumably an emotional attachment to someone when you're able to negotiate all this stuff ahead of time and have these specific expectations, plans, outcomes, all of this stuff. So you're able to play around and explore this risk and explore the sensory seeking regard because you have a safe plan on how to handle situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's not that different than, say, a group of folks out at a bar who say, if somebody creepy comes up, I'm going to give you like a little ear tug and you're going to get me out of here. This is just more in the kink realm of doing that. So
that's awesome.
So that's Allie. And then I had BB, who's totally a cleric. For the to keep mindful of time, I won't read everything here, but between the ages of 27 and 42,
we'll share this in the show notes. But I'd love to hear just what were some of the big findings or the big takeaways that you had. And I know one of the fun things about doing research is the suggestions for further research. So I want to hear like what you learned, but also what do you think we need to study more?
Yes. I think in this research, what we really found were 4 main themes and then like 20 sub-themes, which of course we're autistic. We're going to be so thorough. So we've got healing, self-actualizing, connecting, and playing experiences. Those were the main experiences of empowerment for the autistic adults that I spoke with.
And the holistics don't believe that we seek connection. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, yeah. So underneath healing fell a couple different things. First was sensory regulation. So this was if they are dysregulated, they're going home or going to be with a partner or even doing some things for themselves that are kinky that help them re-regulate. So whether that is somebody doing some self-bondage, the compression, whether that is somebody, whether that's somebody doing, hooks in their skin and they're like levitating and you've got that like vestibular as you rock and you've got the tactile, like whatever it is. Sensory regulation was a big one. Emotional regulation, which often goes hand in hand with sensory stuff. So they were able to emotionally regulate through certain kinky activities with their partner.
Can we officially declare Temple Grandin kinky? Shall we say that out loud explicitly?
I mean, if you look at some kink creators who build certain devices, Temple could have had a whole side hustle going on.
Wow. Maybe she did. We don't know.
You heard it here first, folks. Temple Grandin is officially kinky.
Matt.
Oh, yeah.
So emotional regulation, sensory regulation, subverting norms. This came up in so many ways. I know I was about to introduce BB, who is a cleric. He has a lot of like religious stuff in their background. So all of the like.
Oh, and a cleric. Neat. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I
all
like
of that religious.
I like your D&D stuff. Oh, yeah, that's.
So what they had shared was like growing up, they are from the South. They were raised religious. I think they were going to school, and I forget. I hope I don't misquote them. It was like to become a pastor or a priest or something. And they were miserable. They were using a lot of substances. They didn't know they were an ADHD or autistic yet. They might have known about the ADHD piece, but the meds weren't working for them. It just was not good. And they felt so much shame over their natural inclinations towards more kinky things and towards different gendered stuff and different sexuality stuff. And they just were like, how do I reconcile this? And now in their life, they have a partner who is their priestess, essentially, or their goddess. And they are like worship at the feet of that person. And they have really reclaimed religion in a way that is kinky and feels right for them and better for them,
Oh, that's so nice. Good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So subverting the norms, whether that's flipping religion on its head and doing something quite blasphemous with it, whether that is women being dominant, which is not a societal thing always for us here.
I can see that. Yeah.
Whether that is in the way that they communicate or how they are, what their rules are with their partner or partners, lots of norms being subverted and bringing them like so much peace and enjoyment and empowerment. More autonomy. So a handful of the folks that I interviewed reported, being assaulted early on in life. And so in these situations, they have so much control, whether they are in the dominant position or the submissive position, to stop anything at any point, to tailor whatever's going on to what they actually need, to rewrite something, redo something. There's so much autonomy in it. So kind of like what Matt was saying about PDA, this works quite well because you're consenting to all of this before you're even getting started.
When autistic people find a special interest, they go deep and have a lot of knowledge, even if they don't have that formal education background to go with it. If you want to capture your spin in a book, check out Angela's work at differencepress.com, differencepress.com, and find out more about becoming an author and establishing your credibility with a book.
So even a submissive person might be in charge.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of folks in the BDSM community say that the submissive is the one with the power because, the dominant can only take as much power and control as that person's willing to give up. Yeah. And then reclaiming trauma, that was another piece, whether that is through doing a scene or some role play that is like what you've experienced before, but the outcome is more healing or how you would have wanted that thing to go, or to do those things with someone you trust. And then it kind of reroutes that pattern because our brains are so good with pattern recognition that sometimes we hold so tight to trauma because it's tough to reroute that. And generational change. A lot of folks spoke especially about not wanting to be like their fathers. And so through their relationships, their kinky relationships and the activities that they do, they feel like even though maybe they had witnessed their dad, let's say, hitting their mother, and they are now hitting their partner, it is in a consensual, caring, pre-planned, like they would never do those things out of anger necessarily. It's because the scene was planned or because that's what their partner wants from them. And even pushing some of their abilities to see like, how do I want to be in relationships? The kink realm allows them to explore all of that. And then awesome. The second theme, the second theme was self-actualizing. So a lot of knowledge, whether that is about being autistic or their autistic traits and how that interplays with kink, or if it's more along the lines of like knowledge about themselves, figuring out certain kinks that they're into, figuring out kind of where they want to go in life and what communities they want to be part of and like what friends they want to keep based on others' reactions to their kink involvement.
And that's a big thing, considering that a lot of autistic people feel marginalized because they're not accepted by mainstream. And this goes even further.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a niche group within a niche group that may not be as niche as we think. And then a focus on self. One of my older co-researchers, he talked a lot about, how he's like essentially pushing 50. And he said something like, for him, enjoying rope and like looking into bondage is one of the first things that he's done in his adult life that's truly for himself, not for his partner, not for his kids, not for anybody else, but for him. And, he shared about how when he was younger, he'd always been interested in rope and different ties and Boy Scouts. He volunteered and like he loves the knots. He loves like all those things. And of course, in those ways, that's not sexual in nature. It's just a kink thing of like the rope texture wise feels so good. It's empowering to for him to be on the controlling side of the rope and like deciding how those ties happen. And the achievement of whatever the goal was with the rope and the ties, all of that stuff. It's the first time he's really focused on himself. And it's one of his special interests as well. So focus on self was a really common one, whether it was because of the kinks or the actual acts being done to them or by them to somebody else. Like one of the folks I interviewed had been in a seemingly heterosexual marriage with someone that he does not believe is autistic. And now that he is in kinky autistic neurodivergent relationships, it's much better. Like, he has said, I finally, before, when I was like a quote unquote Marine wife, I don't know what type of ice cream I liked. I don't know what I wanted to do next. It was a given that my husband would decide those things, and that I would just show up and try to like be a people pleasy type of woman, which is not who he is.
Yeah.
And now in this relationship, he has full say. So when we talk about structure and control, like, if he wants the lights off in the house, he and his partners are 24/7, those lights are off. What he says goes, and they consent to that. And he gets to realize what sort of ice cream he wants and what sort of kink stuff he wants to explore, and they consent. And so it's very cool that everybody that I chatted with really said that this allowed them to gain more insight into themselves, their own needs and wants and desires.
That's awesome.
Which then led to authenticity, because as you know yourself and you're like starting to advocate and say those things and accommodate yourself, you're more authentic, and those interactions become so much deeper because you're being you and you're getting your needs met.
And if you get your needs met, you know who you are, then you can more effectively interact with other people.
Yes. Yep. And when you're feeling empowered, you have more courage, to go out there, and you may have more self-esteem to go out there and interact with folks. So then the next one was connecting, which holistics think we don't ever really do, but we do. And, jumping ahead a little bit, future research should look at how they quantify social reward, because it's said that autistic people don't gain as much social reward from social interactions, and it's part of why we don't do it. However,
I have things to say.
So that goes into this. Okay, so I have been on a deep dive recently studying cortisol, and cortisol comes from stress, and we as autistic people have a higher amount of daily cortisol than allistic people, because we're constantly processing chaos, we're constantly anxious, we're constantly churning through cortisol, and it destroys our meat bodies. But one of the things to counteract cortisol is oxytocin. Apparently, oxytocin kills the cortisol, and oxytocin is the bonding hormone, and we get oxytocin from love and from hugs and from interaction and from skin-to-skin contact, which is a thing that allistics believe that we don't do, and they want to get us on LSD, I think, or no, ecstasy.
MDMA. Yeah, that's what's going to make us finally understand love. I can't wait.
Instead of finding yourself, instead of finding people that you relate to, instead of negotiating these things so you feel safe in a relationship, so you can finally experience that level of oxytocin that kills the cortisol, that gives you that feeling of calm and enjoyment. And this is the thing that I really, really wish that people understood better, so that we could live these happy lives, kill the stress, have happy relationships with people, and connect.
It's what you're always talking about, Matt.
That's why we have a podcast about it. Right. Oh, yeah.
I'm right there with you. I mean, even the example of like skin-to-skin contact, sure, that's one way we can get oxytocin, but so are all the other ways you just mentioned. And
yes.
Maybe for someone where skin-to-skin contact is like a sensory hell, maybe one person's wearing some latex or some rubber and the other person's touching that, and you're still getting the attachment and attunement. And so, I mean, I'm not that type of researcher where I can check your like brain chemicals and body chemicals, but I would assume through attachment and attunement, you are going to have more of those feel-good endorphins, you know?
Oh man, yeah.
So, but yeah, so
and bonding endorphins, like who doesn't feel more connected when your needs are being recognized and acknowledged? Like, oh, this is what you like to touch. Like I know that's a big thing. And also I've talked on the Pregnancy is Autistic episode about my pregnancy experience, but I haven't talked about having a baby. So one of my things is I really do not enjoy being touched, but being touched with sticky hands makes me literally want to die. And it turns out what toddlers' main role in life is to touch their mother with sticky hands. And so that's
a design flaw.
It really is. And I had extended postpartum, And a lot of that was because, like, I know that they say like skin to skin after the baby is born, but I needed to not skin to skin. And so that was like, I was like being like people were telling me like an hour a day. And so it like made me hate the thing. I do love my child. I do love my child. I do love my child. I know no one wants to talk me to talk about this because it's like blasphemy or something to say I didn't enjoy
Today's
things
the
about
day
being
for
a
taboo
mother.
topics.
Yeah, exactly. So it's safe. But like, and then like, even as my kid got older, it's like there was a lot of resentment or not oxytocin. I had a lot of not oxytocin and a lot of cortisol because I was like, this thing is going to touch me with the sticky hands again in the face touching. And then I'm a bad person if I don't enjoy it because this is the toughest job I'll ever love. So I need to get about loving it. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good point that you made. I know that wasn't the exact point, but like, I really do strongly believe a lot of the research about what is oxytocin is based on the idea you would enjoy certain things that I often don't enjoy because touch does not secrete anything other than anger for me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's in the other work I do with the child mental health specialist stuff, I'm often talking to guardians about how at the end of the day, your regulated presence is going to be more impactful than things like skin to skin or knowing exactly what to say when your kid is distressed. Like your regulation and that correlate, like that's more important. So it's almost a disservice for people to say you must do X amount of skin to skin or breastfeeding is the only way, or, you know, whatever it is. It's not true. I mean, that's a very holistic way of, it's a very medical model way of looking at things. Yeah.
For sure.
And that's the good thing about the kink, because the kink explores all these alternative ways to get those needs met.
Yes.
Okay, so let's rattle through these findings so that we can share this.
Yeah.
Oh man, we are
info.
oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We like talking about this,
a lot
apparently.
Of good stuff. Yeah, a lot to knowledge, but yeah, to squeeze it in is tough because it's over 130 or so pages. So connecting partnership, comfort, structure, understanding autism when both partners understand, or multiple partners, depending on how many they had, would understand what it means to be autistic, what their autistic traits are, and how those interplay with the relationship or the dynamics at play, or even for the other partner to know they were autistic. I wish I had had a separate question that asked, are your partner or partners also autistic? Because anecdotally, I heard from many of them that, like, yes, they are pretty sure their partners were also autistic. Communication and community. The community piece I'd love to touch on really quickly because I think because this is still kind of a taboo thing, people don't know where to look for community. They don't know how to find it. They don't know that it exists, that there are autistic folks out there doing similar things. So I mentioned FetLife. If people are interested in finding community, definitely hop in there and type autism or autistic in the search. You'll get some stuff. But also on Reddit, there's some stuff. On TikTok, there's some stuff. So there are many places to find us if you look. But for all these folks, all those things were very empowering for them in order to connect with others, with themselves, with their partners, and the community as a whole. And then the final thing that we found for the fourth theme was playing. So the joy from it, the like sensory joy, stimming, special interests, and shared interests are often also part of the kink activities they engage in. The challenge, for some of the folks, it was like, hey, I read about this thing online. Let's try it. Let's see if we can actually do that thing. And so the bonding experience there too of like trying something new, planning it, doing it, seeing how it goes. And then the like aftercare was a big piece too of connecting afterwards to say, how was that for you? Here's how it was for me. Here's what we could do next time, or let's never do that thing again. All of those things brought them joy and connection. And then the novelty of it. So a lot of the ADHDers, so the autistic ADHDers that I interviewed really said they love the structure, but they need a little novelty. And kink, there are so many different ways to do different things. And it just opens up a whole world of possibility. So there was a lot of empowerment in being able to say, like, let's try something new, or let's do that same thing as yesterday, but in a different room or in a different way, or this time I'll be on this side of things and you're on the other side. And yeah.
Yeah. This time we'll need pads and a towel. So yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So those were the main themes, and then sub themes were discussed.
I don't know if any of the research that you've done has pointed you in a direction, or maybe you just have a hunch. But do you think the kink community is more autistic than other communities? Like, do we have a high representation in the world of kink?
Yes, if I had the quote, I'd have Matt read you a stuffy quote about how ASD leads to higher incidences of paraphilia. That one I think was from like 2017 or 18. So yes, autistic folks, kinky folks, more likely to be autistic. Yeah, there seems to be a big overlap there. And as I listen to my co-researchers talk about the kink community and their experiences at workshops, dungeons, munches, or like get-togethers, a very neurodivergent crowd.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a yearly, like an annual virtual conference called Thrive, and it is specifically around the intersections of kink and mental health. And so if you want to find some neurodivergent kinky folks, a lot of them are autistic, that would be a place to go. And it's online. It's pretty accessible. They try to really make it as accessible as possible. So if you have certain accommodations you need to attend on Zoom, they do it every year, and they've got a great team of volunteer staff.
Wow.
I just love the idea of a conference, because where else are autistic people going to find other autistic people that have the same interests in kink? Yeah, that's a way to go. This is the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like not exactly a warning, but what are some of the things in other episodes, not here particularly, we have addressed autistic naivete. And since, we've brought up some aspects of BDSM, I just want to talk about where do you think autistic people might be more vulnerable, and what does safety mean in the context of kink? How do you know if you have it? How do you find it? What are those resources before you like jump in and go to a sex party and take some MDMA so you can have more cortisol or less cortisol or something?
Yes. Well, there are a lot of things that could be red flags or that could put us in some danger in any community, but kink community doesn't escape this. So I think one of the things you'll want to look for if you start to explore this stuff is, are people checking for consent? Are people asking for your boundaries? Or are they just telling you like, oh, hey, welcome around. I'm now your dom, and you're going to call me at 5 p.m. and you're going to send me these types of pictures every day, right out the gate. Like, are there some discussions around consent? Is there like a slow build to doing things with a person? And is there the option to say no? How strong are people coming on to you? Are you getting either the vibe or, if you struggle with alexithymia, are you noticing concretely that these people are trying to take control of you very quickly? So that's a red flag. Communities where they don't talk about like the risk-aware consensual kink stuff, red flag. Communities where you're just getting flooded with explicit content, private messages or pictures, red flag. People should be checking in.
And maybe even that phrase you told us before, safe, sane, and what was the other one?
You'll want to look. Yeah, you'll want to look for the either rack or prick, and I sadly forget what prick stands for exactly.
But if you're seeing that rack, older, more ableist one, it might be, I don't know, but it might be a sign that group isn't maybe as aware or sensitive. It's not like bad, but definitely just like a little flag to pay attention.
I really do like the idea of the consent, because in any relationship, consent, communication, they are essential. So whenever you're in an environment with someone who doesn't value consent and doesn't value communication, doesn't value your well-being, get the hell out, kink or not.
Absolutely. And if you're physically going to places, maybe you find a local group around you, and you show up and they immediately are like, okay, strip down. Whoa, no, let's, go to some munches or the workshops. It should be like a casual teaching format and conversational networking thing almost. Like, it shouldn't be that you're walking in, unless you're going straight to a dungeon party. Don't start there. start learning and educating. And I always suggest too, start like exploring with yourself. There are a lot of these things, a lot of kinky things that you can do for and with yourself. You know, if you think you might like silk, go out and buy some silk. See how that feels. You can do these things without a partner or partners, and you can start to know your limits and your comfort levels more. And then when you are in those situations with other people, you will already kind of know, like, well, some of these things are going to be hard limits or reds for me. And some of these things I'm cool with, and here's where I'd like to explore more. I think we can do ourselves a good service of like figuring it out solo before we jump in.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love that. I know that there are some communities that you actually recommend. You've given us some links. So if you want to start maybe reading and exploring and learning more, or if you're already involved in the kink community and you want to see if you've found some of the cool places Dr. Sharp has found, we're going to put those in the show notes, which you can find over at autisticculturepodcast.com. If you scroll down in this description of this episode that you'll find there, you'll see a couple things. You'll see those links, a little more about our guest today you can read about, and also a place to comment. So we would love to hear from you if this was helpful, maybe surprising. I know I was surprised a couple times, and I think Matt was as well. But check that out, comment. We would love to hear more from you, from our listeners. So Matt, with that, what do you think? Any final thoughts on this for you? I would ask you what was your favorite thing about being autistic, but I'm a little afraid of the answer today. I'm afraid it might include the word dungeon without dragon. I'm not sure what's about to happen.
Dragon to a dungeon. Yeah. Okay. So my favorite thing was when we're recording this, it was right after the solar eclipse, and my son, who is autistic and takes things literally, was told that the sun was going away, and he was going to stay home from school on Monday because the sun was going away. So he was freaking out and having meltdowns, and I explained, no, the sun's not going away. It's just a shadow. Here's some videos. And if you don't like the fact that the moon is in front of the sun, just go out and yell at it and tell it to go home. And he's like, I have power now. I have agency. I can do this. So I have a picture of my son with a scowl and eclipse glasses on, shouting at the moon to go home. And I just love that he went from a place of fear and lack of power and lack of, understanding about this to just challenging the moon. And I'm so proud of him for standing up to a planetary body because it offends him. And I hope that he takes this bravery and will throughout his life, so that anything that takes away his joy, like the sun, he can stand up to and say, hey, moon, go home.
Love it.
So, yeah, this is the way.
Love that. Well, Dr. Kade Sharp, thank you so much for being our guest today. Matt, thanks for getting kinky with me here. This was a fantastic discussion, and I am excited we got to share it together in such a safe space.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Autistic Culture Podcast.
If you like this show, you can help other people find it by taking a few minutes to rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
You can find out more about writing your book with me at differencepress.com. That's difference, DIFFERENCE, press, PRESS.com.
Or getting a psychological evaluation or consult with me at www.mattlowrylpp.com. That's MATT, Matt Lowry, LOWRY, LPP, as in licensed psychological practitioner.com.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember,
no one ever changed the world by being like everyone else.
Special thanks to our content manager, River Robbins, and Aaron Stoner, our producer, for making us look and sound good.